All right, hello and welcome. I have something for you today that you might find interesting. I am looking at a book by Agatha Christie called Destination Unknown, or it was also titled So Many Steps to Death. Let's see if I can get a good angle on it so that there's not too much light reflecting. Okay, so I don't remember where I picked this book up. I think I may have found it at a used bookstore, and I was like, oh, I like Agatha Christie. I'll pick up the Agatha Christie book. And this is an extremely weird book from Agatha Christie because it's like Christie was known for her mysteries, specifically her mysteries with typically they have a very like a very minor event somewhere in the book that is the seed crystal for the path to the truth. And so Agatha Christie is very good at hiding an important fact somewhere, deep in the narrative so that the average reader won't pick it out, and then creating enough, false starts and false positives that even if the reader is careful, the reader will find many different ways to possibly solve the mystery. But of course, only one is actually correct. This book is weird because instead of being a whodunit, instead of being a mystery, it's Agatha Christie's attempt at a thriller, like a spy thriller. And like it's something very odd. It's kind of like if J.R.R. Tolkien had decided at some point to simply write some kind of a courtroom drama, right? It's just weird. And it's not a bad book, but it's definitely like as a thriller, it's mediocre at best. There is a little bit of good tension in a few places in the early part of the book, in the first half of the book, but these places where there's actual tension are pretty few and far between. There is a villain who is rather predictable, but he also has somewhat unique of kind of his evil plan is like, oh, okay, that's kind of a neat idea, and that's kind of hidden behind a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Thrillers are about the chase, and Christie gets that right in this book, in that this book is mostly chase with very little catch. The problem is that the chase is how you build tension and have action, and then the catch is also like action and finality, right? In this case, we don't really get a very good catch. There's a lot of the main characters end up in a situation where they need to try to find a way out. They have a lot of brainstorming of the escape, but all of that kind of comes to naught in the end because our main POV character doesn't really have much of a role in the development of that particular series of events. I would say that it has, for the thriller portion of it, it has kind of an abrupt, unsatisfying end to the main plot. But then it kind of sort of partly redeems itself by throwing a little surprise at you that you probably won't see coming. If you were reading this book as a murder mystery, or as not necessarily murder mystery, but like as a whodunit, right? You might figure it out, but it's such a minor point of the plot that it's not even really part of the plot. It's just something like, oh, hey, by the way, Christie is a competent writer of prose. The prose is functional. The pace is rather slow for a thriller. There's a lot of smokescreen in the form of like ideological thoughts, right? This book was written in, what year was this originally written? 1954, 1955. So kind of the height of the Cold War, right? Or kind of in that area where the danger of the Cold War becoming a hot war was still very much up in the air. All of this ideological talk kind of helps to smokescreen what's actually happening. Unfortunately, where it could add a lot of character interactions and like tension or conflict between characters, it kind of is not allowed to do that. The characters who have these different ideologies are separated from each other, and the main character doesn't really interact with either of them vis-a-vis the other. So these kinds of ideological things are kind of, how to put it? They're there, but they're too isolated to be particularly interesting. Another element of this book that is very strong is its look at scientific hubris. The book is basically all about that in multiple layers, because it's talking about how scientists will be very good scientists in their specialization, but then they'll also be able to be pulled in by some kind of nutty ideology, or that they'll do things for their own particular scientific work, but have no consciousness of what's actually kind of going on around them. There's a lot of scientific hubris in this book, and this is kind of a trend that we've seen, right? Solaris was about scientists being goofy people. This book is about scientists being kind of not ideologically blind, but ideologically blindered, if that makes sense. They can see it, but they try not to, if that makes more sense. All of the ideological stuff leads the reader to guess a bunch of random things in the early parts, but it kind of melts away later. There's not really much going on with it. And aside from the element that it has to deal with the ending, it doesn't really come to a fruitful or satisfying point. I mean, just to kind of layer on what all the scientific hubris kind of feelings we're getting for this one, we have some quotes. Page 110, quote, "The scientists must be masters. They must control and rule. They and they alone are the supermen." This is not the main character speaking, but this is someone that she is talking to, who is kind of outlining his particular view of how the world ought to be. Page 137, quote, "The man of science, madam, is not the cool, calm individual he is made out to be in fiction. In fact, between a first-class tennis player, an operatic prima donna, and a nuclear physicist, there is really very little difference as far as emotional instability goes," end quote. These are both points where a scientist is saying, the scientists are the intellectual elite. They should control things, when most of them only understand their very small particular niches and are totally not blind, but totally unclear about all of the interactions that go on elsewhere in the world. Or a person saying, scientists are just as easily broken mentally as some kind of fragile diva, right? And it's funny. It's funny because having been a scientist, I wonder if this was not, because he's not the cool, calm individual he is made out to be in fiction. I think this is kind of a response to the scientific Superman of the pulp magazines, right? Pulp science fiction is full of these kinds of characters where the scientist goes out to explore or discover new things, and because of his rationality and his ingenuity, he's able to succeed where a normal person would fail, right? This was a common theme in pulp science fiction, and so I think Christie is kind of pushing back against that. But realistically, having been a scientist, having talked to a variety of scientists over the years, I feel like these writers haven't actually talked with that many scientists. Or maybe it's that the pressure of the Cold War was so strong that it caused scientists to end up in this kind of fragile prima donna kind of state. Because, having worked in the hard sciences from, I don't know, say 2003 up until 2023, 20 years approximately, encompassing some of my undergraduate work where I was actually working with scientists, some of my, my graduate work where I was going to conferences and stuff, and my, actual postgraduate professional work, where I was dealing with scientists and going to conferences as well and giving talks and stuff like that. In general, my opinion is that scientists are not really that different from the average person. They have a lot of the same, weaknesses and a lot of the same strengths. They're highly specialized, which means that if you get into something that they're interested, they might talk your ear off, right? But in general, they seem to be not any more maladjusted than the average person that I've known. Um, you know, uh, for example, Wolfgang Ketterle, he won the 2001 Nobel Prize for his work toward producing Bose-Einstein condensation and observing it for the first time. I got to talk with him for 30 minutes. We were on, we had been, our groups were collaborating with his group, or my group was collaborating with his group, and so we were having kind of like a, like like a like a like a like a milestone meeting where we were like, we did this and we did this and we did this, and despite the fact that I was just a lowly grad student, and despite the fact that I hadn't made very good progress in what we were trying to get done, we were on the same train car between where we were meeting and where the airport was. And me and one of my colleagues sat down, and he sat down, next to us. And we actually just kind of talked about science stuff for the whole 20 or 30 minutes. Hey, this is we've been having this problem. And he's like, oh, well, I've had some of my students have this problem. And the way that we dealt with it was like this and this and this. Just keep working at it. You'll figure it out. Make sure that you check your lab notebooks and make sure that you're not missing anything that was done in the past. And we just talked about it for 20, 30 minutes before we got to the airport. Having been to conferences, talking with scientists, it's like, I remember I was presenting a poster and someone walked up and I saw his name tag. I'm like, oh, you're Hal Metcalf. You wrote one of the, books that I use for understanding, atomic physics and stuff like, atomic physics that I've used to understand what I've been doing in my work. And he's like, oh yeah, hi, tell me about your poster. It's like, it's possible that this is something that the Cold War did to scientists. I mean, I certainly don't know. I don't have any, I don't have any memories for before I was alive, right? But, on some level, I find it a little funny to see all of these writers kind of, turning scientists into these neurotic psychopaths when, the ones that I've known have not generally been like that. I don't know, it's just one of those things that I find a little bit irritating. Anyway, Destination Unknown is not a bad book. It is written by Agatha Christie. It is competent. It is moderately interesting, but it fails on a lot of the areas where you want a thriller to do certain things, right? We want tension. We want drama. We want action. We want, very high highs, and we want the lows to be also kind of characterized by kind of a creeping dread or a worry about the characters. We don't get much of that in this book. And so while it is interesting for a Christie fanatic to, kind of 100% and get the platinum trophy, having read all of Christie's stuff, I would say that in general, it is not something that the typical reader of a thriller would be interested in, except as kind of a historical artifact of Christie, of a well-known mystery writer moving into a different genre for a single book and then moving back. And also the fact that it was written, in a very contentious time in history. And there might be some value for it in that sense. That's basically all I have. I mean, if you do want to read it just to see it, it's a short book. It's a little over 200 pages of decent sized text. It's not a hard read or a long read. And so, if you really want to take a look at it, feel free. I'll put a link in the description. But I will say that if you are looking for a really good spy thriller, you will probably want to spend your time elsewhere. But if you're a Christie fan, this is definitely something worth at least looking at to see how she went about doing the thriller kind of formula and how different it is from her mystery books, while still having some of her little, what would you call them? Like the little things that she typically does in her mysteries to make them effective mysteries. You'll find them in this book. They just don't go toward the correct end that a thriller needs to go to. Still, well written, just not not a very good piece of that particular genre. And that's all I've got. So, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you like these reviews, if you like what I'm doing with the channel, and you want to help support me and the channel, there will be links in the description, and you know what to do. So, yeah, have a good week, and I am working on another lessons from my debut novel video. So I'll probably have that out sometime this week. And then the next thing I'm probably going to read is going to be this, which I've heard good things about. So I feel like checking it out, despite the fact that it's a Hugo Award winner, which is kind of scary these days. See you later.